are ready to hustle. What's going on, everybody out there in fantasy land? I am Brian Drake of FightingChanceFantasy.com, joined alongside Dwain McFarland of Establish the Run, Matt Waldman, RSP.com, and FootballGuys.com. Dwain, how are you? How's week 6 treating you? Did you make any money out there?
Man, I made a little bit of money, Drake, but not enough. It's like we've talked about in the past episodes, it's a very interesting season. I'm sure we'll get into some of it, but it's funny how fantasy works, right? Some of the times, these guys get no work on the field and they score a ton of fantasy points out of nowhere. And then you have some guys that all of a sudden take on more of a role and they get no points. No better place to talk about that than your Eagles. So we'll see where the show goes. But yeah, I made a little bit of money, should be more. Still a little bit of a weird season, but I think we can help some folks through some things.
So also, everybody out there, we want to let you guys know that we are here to help you not only with our podcast, but if you'd love to get involved with more of the stuff that Dwayne's putting out over at Establish the Run, we now have a promo code from the good folks at ETR. So if you go over to establishtheRun.com, put in our hustle code, HUSTLE20. That's HUSTLE 20, HUSTLE 20, Hustle 20. That's going to get you 20% off either their weekly, monthly, or season-long package at Establish the Run. So not only are you going to get Dwayne's great utilization work, you're going to get Evan Silva. You're going to get Adam Levitan. You're going to get the buy low report with Hermsmeyer. It's just incredible the stuff you're going to get. I was listening to their podcasts and things for DFS this weekend, and it's really good, folks. Trust me. Head over there. Use our promo code HUSTLE20, and you can either sign up weekly, monthly, or season long. We'd love to have you join us over at Establish the Run. So now that we've got that out of the way, Dwayne, let's get into some quick waiver things. It's going to be a little more of a brisk show, folks. I got to get my kids flu shots this week, so that's where we're at.
It's going to be a bad season, Drake. Bad flu season. Like a bad fantasy season.
On the wire, let me get your thoughts on some of these guys if they're out there and bye weeks are hitting or you're struggling at QB. Cam Newton and Kirk Cousins, two of the first two names to pop off. Cam coming back from that foot injury. He's going to start practicing this week. Cousins coming off 2 straight top 12 fantasy weeks, and he just blitzcragged my Eagles, which was the easiest call in fantasy. Either of those two guys worthy of a pickup, and which one would you prioritize?
Absolutely. And I would still prioritize Cam Newton because while I'm encouraged by what I saw from Kirk Cousins, I do think it looks like, he's starting to get, they're starting to get their legs under themselves in the passing game. You're still dealing with a team, Drake, that is only dropping back to pass 49%. That's the second least in the National Football League for the first 6 weeks of the season. So it's still clearly a run team. They just happen to have really great efficiency against your Eagles, who don't have any cornerbacks. That's been a story so far, last year into this season. It's been a while since the Eagles have been able to stop the pass, and Minnesota knew they were up against a strong, run defense, and props to them. They picked the best way to try to win the game out of the gate and getting up early with some big plays to Stephon Diggs. So while I'm encouraged with Cousins, and I didn't think he would remain as a bottom dweller for the whole season, it's still a situation where they're going to lean more to the run than to the pass anytime that they can. So you're going to need big plays to really sustain Kirk Cousins, and that's what happened last week. As far as Cam Newton goes, if he's fully healthy, if he's truly healthy, with these weapons, this could be the best offense that Cam Newton's got to play in some time. Now, I know there's been talks of, we'll continue with Kyle Allen. If Kyle Allen's winning, we can't take him out. And look, while Kyle Allen has done good, Cam Newton is your franchise quarterback. You got to get him in there. And if he's truly healthy, Drake, the thing you and I both love, right, are his legs. If he's going to be more involved in a passing game with more weapons, more ways to attack, that's less focus on him. And if he can have those weapons and truly get things going with his legs, that could propel him to a top 6 fantasy quarterback status in a year, Drake, where for the first time in a long time, right, there's just not a lot out there on the wire. Right. It's more of a have and have not season at quarterback than we've really ever seen in the past because of all the injuries. So Cam Newton could still potentially be a season changer for you at the quarterback position. Whereas I don't think Kirk Cousins is going to turn into that on an every week, basis. So I would lean towards Cam Newton.
A couple other guys in the AFC East might be available on your wire. Josh Allen, he gets the Miami Dolphins this week coming off his bye, and Sam Darnold, who returned looked great against your Cowboys, 338-2. He's got fantastic weapons that we'll talk about a little later. Either of those two guys tickle your fancy?
Yeah, I like both of those guys. So if you're in a deeper league, I think both of those guys are definitely worth owning. Sam Darnold had a really good preseason, had an okay week one. And like you said, we'll talk about the weapons here in a minute, but I think he's got solid weapons around him. He hit a big play to Robbie Anderson this week. He moved the chains with Jamison Crowder. Demarius Thomas, surprisingly, is looked decent. And then Le'Veon Bell's a nice option out of the backfield. I picked up Sam Darnold in a few high-stakes leagues last week just to try to get ahead of the curve in some situations where I knew I had some bye weeks coming or, I was just really struggling at quarterback. And so, yeah, I like both of those options in deeper leagues.
Whoa. Sorry about that, folks. We got that's what happens when you do a live show. Things get crazy.
Did something hit you, Drake? What happened?
Yeah, one of my like these pop-ups came on my computer. Let's go over
to pop-ups, huh?
Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
we know what popped up on your screen, Drake. Anyway,
wife's
I'll let
not
it go.
home during the day. I thought Pornhub was a fantasy football site.
I thought I had that on my on over here on my tab that says don't track these sites. But anyway.
Okay, running back, there's not a whole lot going on. If you watched the game last night, Jamal Williams, though, did look good. After Aaron Jones just couldn't catch and fumbled the ball away, Jamal Williams came in and looked pretty good. Should have had a touchdown, but sat down on the 1-yard line at the end of the ball game. Dwayne, this week, we're looking at a lot of backup handcuff guys. Chase Edmonds, Darrell Henderson, Mark Walton. Of this group here, are you prioritizing any of them?
So you've got Jamal Williams, Edmonds. Sorry, it broke up for a second. Who were the other two?
Darrell Henderson, Mark Walton, Benny Snell. These are the guys I'm looking to talk about this week at the running back position.
Yeah, I mean, none of them get me super excited. Chase Edmonds is a guy that, we don't know for sure what his role is going to be because David Johnson was dealing with, a little bit of a back issue heading through last week. He didn't practice much until he got to Friday. And so we don't know how much of that is really injury related. But from the time that I saw Chase Edmonds on the field, he was the one of these guys that looked the most electric. Now, Darrell Henderson did some nice things too. The problem for Henderson is going to be when Todd Gurley gets back, he then becomes third in the pecking order again. So Malcolm Brown still led the way, last week with Todd Gurley out of the picture. It was Malcolm Brown handling 50% of the rushing attempts. You had Darrell Henderson handling 27%. So while I like Henderson, I think he's really more only a deeper league stash still at this point because unless we get something happening with Gurley, which still could, we know we've got a chronic knee issue and now you add an injury to that. This could cause, some compensatory, can't talk today, Drake, some compensatory issues. Anyway, he could have some issues going on, cascading. Let's use that word since I can't pronounce. Cascading issues that could go on, from a health perspective. So I'm good with adding Darrell Henderson, but really only in deeper formats. He's not somebody that I'm looking to add in shallow to mid-sized leagues, and he's not somebody that you can trust. Even in the weeks that Gurley's out, we need to see more. You're depending on a big play. The good news is he did look solid, so that's good enough to make him a stash. As far as Jamal Williams goes, yeah, he looked really good. I would probably put him at the top of this list just because Green Bay has shown us, even as Aaron Jones has played well through the early parts of the season, even before this injury and everything happened, we talked about it still being a situation where they were just giving Jamal Williams, more looks than what we thought they would really give them. So it wasn't like this was the first week we've seen where they really gave Jamal Williams significant looks. Yeah, this may have been, his biggest week, but that trend's kind of been sitting there, for the time that Jamal Williams was healthy. So, and this is bad news for Aaron Jones. It just shows even after coming off of a 4-touchdown game, they're willing to change things up based on the way the two guys are playing. I still think Aaron Jones is the lead back, but Jamal Williams, in certain games is going to snug that up closer than what we like. So I would put him at the top of the list.
Yeah, Jamal Williams, 136 total yards and a touchdown, had 5 targets. So
like you said, he could have had 2 touchdowns.
Yeah,
so,
could have had.
I think it's going to be very inconsistent. I think it's going to be tough to deal with. But Aaron Jones is not, he's not a guy that's exactly been the most healthy guy, right, through his career. So I think there's different ways that Jamal Williams, could find fantasy, relevance, one being through his role he has. Another is if for some reason Aaron Jones were to miss 2 or 3 weeks, then, that's going to give Jamal Williams an even bigger bump.
Super deep league. Mark Walton, who I mentioned, 75 total yards. He had 6 carries for 32, 5 of 6 targets. He caught for 43 yards. Still got fewer touches, though, than Kenyon Drake. I don't know if you want to get anywhere near the Miami Dolphins, but it's bye week season.
Yeah, his trends are good as far as utilization goes, but that's really all I can say. I don't really want to deal with any of the Dolphins, but like you said, if you're in an absolute pinch when the bye weeks come and you're looking for a guy that might just give you 5 to 10 points and not a 0, and you feel that's all you need, then hey, Mark Walton's your guy.
Let's move over to wide receiver now, Dwayne. And boy, oh boy, if Jamison Crowder or Robbie Anderson were dropped in your league, jump on these guys because, baby, the Jets are back. You got Sammy Darnold slinging it all over the place. He's done sharing lollipops or, kissing 16-year-olds, whatever he's doing out there to get mono. So you've got Jamison Crowder, 9 targets. He had 17 in week 1, remember. He went off for almost 100 yards. Robbie Anderson's catching bombs out there. You've got Chris Herndon. He's going to be coming back. So either of these Jets guys, pick them up. There's not a ton to say about them, but they're going to put it together. These guys are wide receiver 2s and 3s going forward.
Well, yeah, we say there's nothing to say, but they're really 2 of the most significant names we're going to discuss on the show. So if you're in a medium to small size league, these guys are probably there. Depending on what you're looking at dropping, they might be viable options. Demaryius Thomas, if you're in a deeper league, his snaps have gone from 78 to 82%. Routes per dropback, 86% and 86% over the last 2 weeks. He's seen a target share of 35% and 13%. And then to your point, Drake, on Crowder, here's the big thing with Crowder. Week 1 with Sam Darnold, 37% target share. Mm-hmm. Week 6, you get Sam Darnold back, 28%. The weeks in between, 19, 23, 12. So, he's at 25% target share on the season, but really, when you look at where he's at with Sam Darnold now, while it's a smaller sample size, the guy's sitting right around, he's above a 30% target share. Now, we will likely get Chris Herndon back here in the next week or 2. I know he was activated yesterday. So that could put a little bit of a damper on Jamison Crowder because I expect him to work inside as well. But I think 25%, per week with Darnold back in the fold is likely. And for Robbie Anderson, what Darnold does is he gives you that ability to hit the big play, which you just didn't have when you have the backup quarterbacks in. And we saw it. That's the biggest play that the Cowboys have given up and for however long. And that was the longest play from scrimmage this season in the NFL was Darnold to Robbie Anderson. He had 25% of the targets. So, the guy's a constant big play threat. He accounts for 47% of the team's air yards so far this season. I don't see that changing. I think he'll stay around the 50% mark just due to the nature of, the talent of these other guys with Crowder and Thomas and Herndon being more intermediate to short type options, and this is something where we've seen Robbie Anderson improve throughout the preseason, his ability to do more than just be a deep ball threat. There's a chance, Drake. There's a chance that Robbie Anderson pencils in as an every week wide receiver 2 with Sam Darnold back. He's still the guy I would prioritize the most out of these because he can hit the big play from anywhere as well. If he hangs around at 20 to 25, I would say 25% target share is what it's going to take just because, the Jets, here's what I hate about them, Drake. It's just like what Adam Gase has done over the last several years. We thought we saw some, quick tempo stuff in the preseason. It just hasn't played through to the season. Only 57 plays per game, which is one of the bottom in the league. Only two plays per minute, which is in, the bottom 25% of the league. So the pace is still slow. And it could improve with Darnold. Some of that could just be because you didn't want, when you're playing with the quarterbacks they've been playing with, I would play as slow as possible as well. And it played through this past weekend, but the Jets did have a lead. So there's still hope there. But right now, that's the only limiting factor I see on these guys is a slow-paced offense. But if either of them are available, especially Robbie Anderson, he could end the season as a wide receiver 2, and he's going to have wide receiver 1 weeks.
Let's go over to another team in the AFC East, and that is the New England Patriots. People forget about them a little bit because they played on Thursday night, but there's an opportunity here because Josh Gordon is banged up. Julian Edelman's banged up a little bit. So we've got Jacoby Myers. He came in. He was 4 for 54 against the Giants, okay? He was their preseason hero. Everyone remembers him. Philip Dorsett didn't play against the Giants, but he's going to be back practicing this week. Hopefully, all signs look to see him playing this week against he's against the Jets, right? This week.
I don't even have it in front of me. I believe so. Yeah, that's right.
They're at the Jets, and If you're really forward thinking on the waiver wire, their first round pick, N'Keal Harry, is going to practice this week, looking at a week 9 return. So we've got a lot of options here in Foxborough. If you're looking for a pass catcher, and I know I've got some teams that are. So we've got Jacoby Myers, Philip Dorsett. Those two guys for this week, Dwayne, how would you prioritize them? And then give me your thoughts on N'Keal Harry going forward.
Well, I just need to know more about Dorsett, so I want to see what the practice reports say. It sounds positive so far. If it's good, Dorsett's the guy that you prioritize. If not, then you pivot over to Jacoby Myers. I mean, the thing with Myers is each time the Patriots have been without any one of their pass catchers, he's been the guy to step in and step up. And the thing is he does well with his opportunities. He made several great catches in that game on Thursday night, some in very tight coverage, some in big spots in the game. Mm-hmm. And so he's a guy that, he had that preseason buzz, Drake. He did some really good things in the preseason. Now he's carrying it through to when he gets opportunities, in the regular season. So he's a guy actually I talked about last week at Establish the Run, in my utilization report as one of the guys in deeper leagues. That would be a good preemptive ad, because every time this team is dealing with having somebody out, he's been the guy to step in. And like you said, there's multiple paths to him seeing value. Edelman, as a receiver, we know that can be, banged up. He can, he's pretty tough. He tries to play through his injuries, but it seems like he's consistently on the injury report. And so he's always a risk to be injured. Josh Gordon, like you said, is already dinged up. Philip Dorsett, we already mentioned, he's trying to come back, from an injury himself. So I think there's plenty of paths for Myers here. Harry is a guy that I'm interested in because they need the help, Yeah. So we'll have to see what his practice reports look like. But if you're in a super deep league, then now's the time, when you've got to make these pickups, a week or two ahead of time, then now's probably the time on Harry. But I would still prioritize Myers ahead of him, because Myers has outplayed him in the preseason and in the season so far, and I'm not so sure that Harry jumps ahead of him.
In San Francisco, what do you know? Our guy Dante Pettis, he's kind of back. I don't know. He only caught 3 balls, but he had 6 targets, 3 for 45. What I like is he played a season high 72% of the snaps. That led all San Francisco wide receivers over Goodwin, over Deebo Samuel. Probably should have scored yet again. Our friend Matt Waldman did an excellent breakdown of Dante Pettis for Football Guys. You can read that. Go follow Waldman. He's awesome. So looking at Dante Pettis, again, the volume isn't there, but he's on the field. They're kind of looking to him. Someone has to emerge in this offense, right, Dwayne?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key part, what you just said. There's 2 things. One is the trends. 2 is somebody's got to emerge. It's not, Deebo Samuel's now dealing with a growing issue. He was actually at 80% of the routes per drop back, which led the team last week. Dante Pettis was second at 74%, of course, behind, George Kittle, who led the team. But, Pettis has got a positive trend around his snaps. He's got a positive trend around his routes per dropback, and those are positive things. He had 18% of the targets, which was second to Kittle last week on the team. So here's the thing: we've talked about Pettis. He's a good separator. He's a good route runner. He's just got to stop the drops. He's got to stop some of the boneheaded plays that have occurred, the fumbling. Those are the kind of things that seem to be holding him down. And then, just some of the nagging injuries. I think the other positive for him is we found out that he had really been battling, a couple of injuries heading into the bye week. So maybe now he's just finally healthy, Drake. Maybe now he's finally healthy. The trend is in a positive, it's positively trending upward. I would not recommend dropping a lot on Pettis, but if you're in a deeper league, I would definitely prioritize Pettis as being one of the guys that I want to be preemptive about. He's a guy that you can get for, very little of your waiver wire money, in this week. And it may cost you a lot more going into next week, especially if Deebo Samuel can't play next week, because that's going to automatically give Pettis, more opportunities, just based on that alone. So all the trends are good. He's a guy, like I said, I don't think you got to go spend a ton on, but he's definitely worth rostering in deeper leagues.
San Francisco at the Washington Redskins. We know they're not stopping anybody. One last guy.
While we're on the 49ers, just real quick,
Sure.
I don't know how we're going to handle this with you needing to go pretty quick, but Tevin Coleman, just so folks know, his snaps jumped from 33 to 56%, where Breida stayed steady at 35%, and Raheem Mostert dropped to 9%. This is another guy that I covered last week for Establish the Run in my utilization report, and talked about the potential for this to turn into a two-man backfield, and that's really what we saw this last week, so that's a positive thing. It didn't really help Breida, but it definitely helped Tevin Coleman. He accounted for 45% of the team rushing attempts, and Drake, he had 4 attempts from inside the 5. So 100% of the work from inside the 5 all went to Tevin Coleman. We didn't see a Raheem Mostert sighting, no Jeff Wilson sightings. So that's really positive stuff. And he also led the team in routes per dropback at 46%. So while the rushing efficiency was down without Kyle Juszczyk, and you also were dealing with having two starting tackles out, that hurt the 49ers from an efficiency standpoint. But I think Tevin Coleman, the guy they spent the money on in the offseason, while he's not, a guy that's going to get 60 to 70%, of the team's work, he is showing that he's going to be the lead back among these 3 guys.
Matt Breida really needs to just break a long run like he did in Monday night a week ago. It seems like that's the only way he's going to get in the end zone.
That's right. That's the only way. And we discussed that last week on the podcast. That's his limiting factor.
One last guy at wide receiver. If you watched the game last night, you saw something called Allen Lazard pop off. And I initially was like, I don't want to talk about any of these guys. But then when I heard the way Aaron Rodgers talked about Lazard after the game, how he sits next to him in the meetings, how he's so proud of the kid, he's working hard, he knows, where to go, he just needed an opportunity. And the coaching staff, LaFleur, said Rodgers was calling for this kid's number when the push came to shove at the end of the game. He 4 of 5 targets, 4 for 65 and a touchdown. MVS looks, like a lost in space out there. Allison's hurt. You've got Adams looking like he's nowhere close to playing. Somebody's got to catch the ball in Green Bay. So why the hell not Allen Lazard?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a long-term thing, to be honest. He was the guy that had the matchup. You had Darius Slay taking the only, established receiver they had remaining in the game, which was Marquise Valdes-Scantling. Darius Slay is a top 5 cornerback in the league. The Lions play some of the most man coverage outside of the Patriots in the league. They press, they do all the things that frustrate a lot of young receivers, but Lazard was getting the 3rd corner. And that's why Rodgers went to him. Rodgers treated him enough to go there, but it's more of a matchup thing than anything. I would not spend a lot of money on Lazard. The other thing is he doesn't catch the ball cleanly. That's been an issue. That was the same issue in this game. He was lucky to catch the touchdown pass. He nearly dropped it. One of the other catches that he had, to the outside, a lot of body catching, trapping, not a real clean catcher of the football. Now, he did fine. I just don't expect this to be something that once we see Jamal Adams and Geronimo Allison back, I don't think Allen Lazard will be worth anything. I don't think he's taking anyone's job in this situation. If this is a deal where Devontae Adams misses this next week and then there's also no Geronimo Allison, then you could talk about in a deeper league, Lazard being worth someone to stash on your roster. And if you're in a super tight spot, super, super deep league, maybe you feel like putting him in there, but I don't trust it.
To me, it's a very much a Byron Pringle situation from last week. Reminds me of that. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are your tight end sucks because they all suck. All right. On the wire right now this week, you probably have Chris Herndon available. He's going to be a factor in this Jets offense. He is nursing a hamstring injury, so we're not even sure he's going to play this week. But if you've got the space, you can add Chris Herndon. By all means, go for it. You really want to check the wire for Hunter Henry. If he was dropped, which I'm sure he was, I saw Mike Clay was talking about in ESPN leagues. Hunter Henry's available in like 50% of leagues on ESPN. The guy dropped 8 for 102 on 9 targets in his first game back. So above everything else, I think if Hunter Henry's on your wire, he needs to be the A1 priority.
Absolutely. And it's a guy that we even mentioned last week. I picked him up last week in a high stakes league, which you never see.
High stakes, pal.
Yeah, high stakes, pal. He was available, and I picked him up. I wasn't able to put him in because I didn't know for sure if he was going to play because he was the late game, and then O.J. Howard played the London early game. So I was in a situation where I just had to go with Howard, but I clearly now have a tight end that I much prefer to O.J. Howard and Hunter Henry. Played 78% of ran a route on 78% of Phillip Rivers dropbacks, despite only playing 66%. We talk sometimes, Drake, O.J. Howard's the opposite. He'll play 90% of the plays, but he only runs a route on 60%. Hunter Henry's a guy that when he's out there, they're scheming him up. They want to get him involved. He had 20% of the targets, which was second to only Mike Williams. And then end zone targets, he had 2. So he accounted for 50% of the team's end zone targets for the week, and this is a team that just got off to a terrible start. But, Keenan Allen continues to see a ton of attention. Mike Williams is really more of your deep threat guy. His average depth of target is 16.5 on the season. Austin Eckler's opportunities are now being limited by Melvin Gordon, and both of those guys work underneath. So Hunter Henry right now, with Keenan Allen getting all this attention, he can easily be the lead target on any given week because he's the guy working that intermediate area of the field that Phillip Rivers is so good at navigating, through anticipation and by understanding the way the game works. So Hunter Henry is a guy that absolutely, and obviously his production came through in a huge way, so he's going to cost a lot. But the main thing that I want to point out is his utilization is there. I expect his snaps and his routes per dropback to only go up, as he, returns to full health. So if he's a guy that you held on to or you picked up last week, great. If not, and he's still available this week, you should absolutely, especially if you're in fantasy tight end wasteland, this is what you've been waiting for. If you're an OJ Howard owner, this is the moment you've been waiting for. Don't mess it up. Don't be cheap. Be willing to put what you think you need down to get this guy on your team in your league.
Just to touch on the Chargers, and they're a disaster. In a half-point PPR, the last 3 weeks combined, Keenan Allen has about 15 fantasy points. So
yeah, he's getting all the attention now. So after going off for 20 in PPR, after going off for 26, 18, and 44, now he has 10, 6, and 5 points over the last 3 weeks. And it's everything to do with the way defense is playing. We talked about this all the time last year, Drake, on our pod, what do defenses do? Every 3 to 4 weeks, the defense is looking for the defense and their film work. They're looking for these trends and they're trying to figure out how they take away a team's favorite things. And so what you're seeing the Chargers now do is pivot away from Keenan Allen, and they have to try to win in other ways. And that means more opportunity for Hunter Henry and more opportunity for Mike Williams.
All right, with the rest of the pod here, let's talk about some offenses and some players that might be concerning to us, or we're curious if their performances are going
to real quick, Drake. At tight end, just real quick. Because
what do you got?
If Hunter Henry's gone, a guy to pay attention to now is definitely Jason Witten. Snaps have gone from 79 to 83 to 88%. Routes per dropback, 69 to 82 to 79%. So he's sitting at 70% on the year, but he's really an 80% guy. We would give anything to see OJ Howard running 80%, running a route on 80% of Jameis Winston's dropbacks, right? Especially now with Amari Cooper potentially dealing with, this thigh issue that might keep him out. Jason Witten could easily become the number 1, number 2 target on certain weeks. It's going to be him and Gallup, and then you'll have Cobb working in. So if you're in a really tough situation at tight end, I'll tell you, I'd rather be starting Jason Witten over OJ Howard. There's some other guys that I would be starting Witten over. So I know he's very old, but he still knows how to get open. Dak trusts him. You're not going to get a lot of run, not a lot of yards after the catch. He also got an end zone target this last week, which was his second of the year. So Jason Witten is another sneaky name on your waiver wire, if you're really struggling, that you can go grab.
Did Booger McFarland pay you to say that? Your cousin?
Yeah, Booger, the check's in the mail is what he said. We'll see.
Let's see. So the Eagles play the Cowboys this week. The Eagles just released linebacker Zach Brown. He was more of a run stopper anyways. The Eagles have literally nobody at linebacker to cover anybody out of the backfield, mind you. They've got a kid, Nate Gary, who was a safety in college. They've got Kamu Grugier-Hill, who was hurt in the preseason. And then they've got some practice squad scrubs. So they're dead at linebacker. So it could be a sneaky week for a guy like Jason Witten.
Absolutely.
All right, let me talk to you about some offenses here. This is what you excel at. If you follow Dwain on Twitter at Dwain McFarland, or you read his work at Establish the Run, you know he's all about utilization. He's all about trends. So there's a scary trend going on with the running backs in Kansas City. So Mahomes is banged up. He's regressing a little bit with the ankle in terms of his touchdown production. But holy schmoly, what do we do with any of these guys in Kansas City? You've got McCoy, who goes 10 for 44, playing half the snaps. Damian Williams, only 2 for 20. He did get a touchdown, but his snaps are down. We see Darrell Williams in the game catching long passes. I'm alarmed with this situation because Damian Williams now is a huge red flag in anyone's lineup.
Yeah, really what's happened is, we've got, here's the good, there's good and there's bad news. The good news is I think this is pretty much turned into a two-man show with a little bit of Darrell Williams. Darrell Williams has not seen a rushing attempt over the last 2 weeks. He is out there for some passing plays, as you alluded to, but only 16% and 14% of the dropbacks. So not really a guy you can depend on for anything. So if you've got Darrell Williams, you need to be in a deep league, and you're just really holding because you're hoping one of these other guys get hurt. But at the same time, we've seen what happens. When one of these other guys go down, they're just going to use more Darwin Thompson. It's still going to be a mess. So to your point, Drake, it's really tough to navigate. Now, the good news for Damian Williams and McCoy because of that is really it's kind of those two guys, but we don't know which one it's going to be. In week 5, 64% of the rushing attempts went to Damian Williams. In week 6, it was 73% to LaShawn McCoy. Now, what I will say is LaShawn McCoy is breaking a run of over 15 yards on 10% of his carries. That's freaking really good, folks. And he looks good out there. I don't know why the team doesn't just move away. Just make Damian Williams your passing back, bench Darrell Williams, and let LaShawn McCoy be your running back, for whenever you're going to run the ball. That would make so much sense. We could get viability out of all of them. We would know based on what we think the game script's going to be. Do we use them? Do we not use them? But right now, we just don't have that. That's what would make sense. But as you know, like a hat tip to a guy like Sigmund Bloom that talks about the assumption of rational coaching, we just don't know what to think about this. To your point, so whenever I'm sitting here looking at my utilization report, it's like this checkerboard of like green, yellow, green, yellow, green, yellow, back and forth between these guys. We just don't know how they're going to use them. There's no rhyme or reason.
Outside of Tyreek Hill, final note on Kansas City here, you can't trust any of those wide receivers, right?
Yeah, so what we saw this past week is Demarcus Robinson did stay the most involved, which is what we had kind of predicted for when Tyreek Hill would come back. The problem is he's just not producing on his opportunities. I think he had 4 targets last week, and I don't think he brought in any of those. He's just not a special player. It turns out that week 2 big – remember when we talked about this, and I even said, wow, I thought Demarcus Robinson would be more involved, but I really thought he was a possession receiver. I thought you'd see 5 catches for 55 yards, and maybe you get a touchdown. Turns out that's really all Demarcus Robinson is, and I'm not even sure if he's that. I mean, really, these guys are just dudes outside of Tyreek Hill and outside of Travis Kelce and even Sammy Watkins when he can be healthy. Mecole Hardman and Byron Pringle, they just basically with Tyreek Hill back, they split the third receiver spot. You had Hardman playing 53% of the snaps, Pringle 60%, Pringle 67% of the routes per drop back. So once Sammy Watkins comes back, I think what we'll see, Drake, is you're going to have Tyreek Hill, obviously continues to be his thing. It'll be Demarcus Robinson and Sammy Watkins on the field, but you'll see Robinson losing some snaps to Hardman and Pringle. So really, it's just going to turn out that the only guys you really want to own, that, to your point, you can trust, Sammy Watkins, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce. And Watkins, honestly, we're hoping that Tyreek Hill helps him because when he had a chance to be the dude, he literally just crumbled. I mean, I would have thought with Tyreek Hill being out, Sammy Watkins would easily be a wide receiver 1 at this point of the season, but he's not. So even Sammy Watkins is a little bit on the outside looking in. It's really Tyreek Hill, then it's Travis Kelce, and we're hoping that Hill can help the efficiency of Sammy Watkins.
Appreciate all you guys watching us on YouTube right now. We do have a YouTube channel. Just search Fantasy Football Hustle Podcast. We have a Facebook group too. So search the same thing on Facebook and like the page. It's Fantasy Football Hustle Podcast. And we appreciate all that good stuff. Like us, find us on whatever podcast outlet you have. Rate the show, review the show. And we appreciate that greatly. I'm talking here with Dwain McFarland of Establish the Run. And we want to know what we're seeing utilization-wise, because Dwain's utilization report just dropped on EstablishTheRun.com. I'm reading it right now as we speak. It's up on my screen. And if you want to read it yourself, head over to EstablishTheRun.com. Use our promo code HUSTLE20 for 20% off any of their packages. That's weekly, monthly, or season-long. Evan Silva's putting out fantastic content over there. If you want Dwain's written work, go check it out over at EstablishTheRun.com. Promo code HUSTLE20. So, Dwain, what the hell's going on with these Los Angeles Rams? That was brutal. Jared Goff threw for 78 yards, 17 of which went to Cooper Kupp. Malcolm Brown, everyone plugs him in a lineup. The guy goes 11 for 40. That was awful.
Yeah. And we've talked about this. It's another thing that we've talked about. The Rams offense has been figured out. And whenever they play better teams, it's just – we can't count on it the way that we used to. It's almost like they're almost, what they feel like to me, Drake, despite having 3 wins versus only 1, they feel a lot like the Atlanta Falcons. I feel like, okay,
we're going to talk about next.
I'm going to keep throwing these guys out there. But I just don't know what I'm going to get each week. Mm-hmm. And so here's the big problem. Malcolm Brown was actually fine. It's the game script. They just got their butts kicked. I mean, Malcolm Brown, he played okay. He had 50% of the attempts. He ran a route on 50% of the dropbacks. So his utilization and everything is there. They just totally sucked this last weekend. The 49ers kicked their butts. But here's the big thing I see, with the Rams. Gerald Everett's not going away. He's a pain. Either you own him and you're fine with it because, he was the guy we talked about last week. If you were really hurting at tight end that you just had to go ahead and take a chance on.
And he let you down this week.
Well, we say that, but his utilization's fine. That's the beauty of the utilization report, right? What you're looking for is who are the guys getting the routes, who are the guys getting the snaps, et cetera, et cetera. But he played 61. He ran a route on 61% of the dropbacks, which is way better than what he used to be. He's been in a 54, a 72, a 61 on the last several weeks, which isn't great, but his targets have been 20% and 21%. He has out-targeted Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks each of the last 2 weeks, which is what we talked about last week. If that continues to where he's a guy that they're scheming, that they're getting into the mix, because he's another guy that his snaps are actually lower than his routes per dropback. That means when they have him out there, they intend to use him, right? He's similar to what we just talked about with Hunter Henry a minute ago. Those are key things you want to look for if you're looking at my utilization reports on Twitter. Just like we look at, like I said earlier, a lot of snaps with less dropbacks means a guy's staying under block. Lower snaps with bigger dropback rates means teams are trying to get them out there to go catch the ball. Same thing you see with Mark Andrews, with the Ravens. But right now it's problematic for Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks, Drake, because it's kicked the floor out from under these two guys. Last week, 13% and 13%. The week before, and that's Woods, then Cooks. The week before, 18% and 6%. Now Cooks left the game with a concussion. But the week before that, 19 and 12%. And that was with, Everett just getting 10%. But with these big shares we're seeing go into Cup, and now with Everett getting involved, you cannot trust Robert Woods and Brandon Cooks on an every week basis anymore. They're basically guys you're trying to figure out, do you think the game script's going to work out right? Are the matchups good enough that Jared Goff can actually be functional? Or is this going to be a game where they just go to the other guys, or B, a game where they're just not efficient enough to make it worth putting them in the lineup? And that's a bad place to be if you spent, a 4th or 5th round pick on Robert Woods or Brandon Cooks, but it's just the nature of where we're at.
If you're ever going to get right as the Rams, it's going to be this Sunday, because you travel to play the Atlanta Falcons, and they simply cannot cover anybody. So let's talk about their offense, because Matt Ryan is just tearing it up. I own Matt Ryan in a few leagues, and garbage time Matty Ice is the best Matty Ice. Guy was 30 of 36 for 356 and 4 touchdowns in their loss to the Cardinals. I want to talk about, we know Matt Ryan, he's going to throw the ball a ton. That's fine. Their line stinks. But Devonta Freeman, in terms of a fantasy scope, he's scoring, so that's helping. He's on the field. He's playing. That's fine. Julio Jones, though, he went 8 for 108 this week, got 9 targets, but he's not giving you those Julio games, Like, what are you seeing with this Atlanta offense? And, it's just kind of, you just roll them out because they stink and they're going to be in garbage time.
Yeah, you have to. Let's start with Julio. We'll come back to Freeman. We'll talk about the other receivers really quick too. My thought is this whole staff should be fired. Julio Jones plays 67% of your snaps.
That's idiotic.
Calvin Ridley plays 58%. Mohamed Sanu plays 69%. If you folks haven't checked out, the podcast that I do with Jay Moyer, you can follow him at Jay Moyer FB on Twitter, that we do for the RSP. It's the RSP Fantasy Film and Data podcast. We talked about, some of this last week, and there are certain offenses, Drake, that they're just running an offense, and wherever these receivers line up or whatever, it's just about, okay, here's the way the read goes and here's where the route's going. There's not as much emphasis put on, but look who's lined up. where, right? So basically, here's an example. So some systems you drop back and you may see, well, Julio's got double coverage, so I'm just going immediately away. There's other schemes where Julio may have double coverage, but if you get this type of look and he's in this position by this many steps of the DB, you still let it go because he's Julio Jones and he should still be the top player that you're going to, even in situations like that. Those days for Julio Jones right now, they're gone, because this is a team that's just rotating players through. It's all about, everybody basically being equal. You're just throwing the ball to the hot read, or to not necessarily the hot read, but you're throwing based on the way the scheme works. But they're not prioritizing creating looks for Julio Jones. They're not prioritizing making things look right for Calvin Ridley. And I think that's a big reason why Austin Hooper is having such a big year, is because, they're running a lot of plays. They're at 64 plays per game, which is just a little bit above, the league average of 62. They're a little above the league average on plays, per minute, but, they're running enough plays, but they're throwing all the time is the key. Their drop back rate is 73% on the season, which is one of the highest in the league. So they're dropping back to pass way more than they're actually running the ball. So Austin Hooper's the guy that's not leaving the field, Drake. He's the one staying out there, a little bit more, or at least he had been. This last week, he was off the field a little bit. So with it being so even, that's what's actually helped Austin Hooper out. But for Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley, we need some new coaches, to be honest, because the guys aren't different. They're still great players. It's just the way this scheme is working. As far as Devonta Freeman goes, what you're really looking for, Freeman is fine in games, where we're going to keep the script competitive. Even if you're trailing a little bit, that's okay. Because if you really look at it, in week 3, the Falcons lost by, 3 points. If you look at week 6, the Falcons lost by 1 point. And in those games, those are the games where Devonta Freeman saw the highest snap count, 62% and 72%. So, these are situations where Freeman's getting out there, whenever the team, is doing well, but when they're not, it seems to just be split more ways. And so this last week, he did see 76% of the rushing attempts, which is, it's great. He ran a route on 53% of the dropbacks, which that had been below 50% the last 2 weeks, which is positive. But, he still didn't have a rushing attempt inside the 5. He still only got 1 of those on the season. Ito Smith has 4. So he's a guy to monitor, but my gut tells me, or really more this data tells me, Drake, that Freeman is still, right now, his production is above what his utilization is. So he's a guy that if I can sell high, and I hate saying that because Devonta Freeman, he's a guy I own all over the place. So he's not a guy I'm going to go give away. But if I can sell while he's high, and when I say sell high, I see, I have some folks come to us on Twitter, and I can't always respond to everything, but I'll see, hey, I took the advice, I sold high. What I'm expecting to see is a really nice name in return. Don't go trade Devonta Freeman. I don't know, Drake, give me a name. I'm terrible at just coming up with them on the spot. Don't go trade Devonta Freeman.
Adrian Peterson.
Yeah. Well, obviously, people know that's going to be a downgrade, but I want to see a really good name. Right. I want to see a really good name in return. And typically it's better to target a different position. If you just try to go player for player, head up at the same position, most of your league mates, everybody just thinks they're getting the better end of the deal, basically, in those kind of trades. So what I'm looking for is to see someone go trade for a receiver that just had trade for Keenan Allen. I would definitely do that. Eventually these teams are going to have to start paying attention to Hunter Henry. They're going to have to start paying attention to Mike Williams. Keenan Allen's a guy that we know is going to finish at 25 to 30% of the targets on the season, for the Chargers, whereas Devonta Freeman is in a much more volatile situation. So you're buying low on a guy that he's going to be back on the upswing, and you're selling a guy who's overperforming really what his utilization says. That's the kind of deal I would be looking for.
I loved the fact this week that we got a bunch of our listeners to join us for a DFS contest on DraftKings. And we're going to do that again in the coming weeks. We'll just tweet it out. And Dwayne's got 8 billion followers on Twitter now, so you can reach him, easily. And congratulations to the guys who cashed in. We'll make that group a little bigger each and every week. So just thanks to everybody coming in. We'll keep the entry low. We don't want to scare anybody off. Lastly, Dwayne, let's talk about these Chargers running backs, because Melvin Gordon came back. I know Evan Silva just tweeted about it. Austin Eckler was doing so well, and now Melvin Gordon comes back and outsnaps him by 9. He only ran 8 times for 18 yards. This offensive line is abominable. It's just horrific. There's no way Melvin Gordon's going to be successful behind this line. What do you do if you own these two guys, and what is your utilization saying? It can't be good for our guy Eckler.
Well, hopefully you listened last week and you moved Eckler, because we said he was a sell him right now based on those 14 targets. Mm-hmm. I didn't see that repeating. I just didn't see that being I felt that was very fluky. I thought he might be able to sustain a little bit of, more target volume than what he did this past week, because he fell to 9%, Drake, which is terrible, but that's terrible when you're depending on it for him. But snaps down to 45%, Melvin Gordon up to 60%, rushing attempts 36% for Eckler versus 57% for Melvin Gordon. So, when you think about it, Anthony Lynn, the head coach for the Chargers, told us this was what was going to happen, and it's happening. So when you have coach speak, then line up and you see these trends, it's probably too late to try to sell on Eckler. But right now, for me, Eckler is pretty much just in the range of, if you want to flex him on a bye week, okay. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, he's essentially what we thought before Melvin Gordon held out, which was in redraft leagues, he was probably a 10th, 11th round pick, a guy with some upside. If Melvin Gordon got hurt, he could fill in for you in a pinch. He would occasionally have a big game whenever he might pop a big reception for a touchdown. That's really back to where he's at, because I believe this next week you're going to see Melvin Gordon even more firmly entrenched. The worst part of it is this, Drake. 43% routes per drop back, whereas Melvin Gordon jumped to 59%. People forget. Now, Melvin Gordon didn't play great with his snaps, but neither did Eckler. It's to your point. This is an offense that has problems. Their offensive line lost, the only good lineman really they had left, Pouncey, their center, this last week. And so, their offensive line is a wreck. Neither one of them are going to be great. But right now, you can't put Austin Eckler into your lineup. So if there's by any chance you can live off of the 29 and 24 points he traded, he scored in week 4 and 5 before he put up this 6-pointer this last week. By all means, move him, but it's probably too late.
Yeah. Well,
and Melvin Gordon, if you can buy him on the super cheap, now's the time, because they're going to give him the role that Eckler's had, for all of this season so far. And so if the Chargers manage to get things going, Melvin Gordon's most likely to be the recipient. So he's a buy low.
I'm flipping through Dwayne's utilization report here at Establish the Run. A lot of juicy names in here, some good content. We're not going to give it all away here on the show. We want you to head over to establishtheRun.com. Use our promo code HUSTLE20. It's going to get you a break on weekly, monthly, or season-long packages at Establish the Run. So thanks to Evan and Adam, the guys over there, for hooking us up with that. Final thoughts, Dwayne. Anything else for our fans out there?
Eagles running back, Drake. It's you're an Eagles fan, so we got to talk about it. Jordan Howard played 59% or 63% of the snaps. That's a season high. Miles Sanders, 30%, despite having a big week. Rushing attempts, 59%, Drake, of the rushing attempts. That by far is the most of the season. Miles Sanders and his no vision down to 14%. And people are going to be, man, Miles Sanders was awesome. He scored 18 points in a PPR this last week. He was freaking lucky to do it.
They don't trust him.
Only ran routes on 33% of the dropbacks, 8% target share. He's still young. He's still a guy you hold, but don't think you can go trust Miles Sanders in your lineup. And Jordan Howard this week, folks, chalk it up. He's going to score 2 touchdowns against the Cowboys. Guaranteed. They cannot stop the running game on the inside. The guy's getting all of that work. He gets Jordan Howard over the Jordan Howard, actually, right now, I don't have it in front of me, everything. He's top 3, though. He's top 3 in rushing attempts inside the 5-yard line, and he's getting 100% of that work. And this is a really good offensive line. So despite Jordan Howard falling from 33 to 12 to 5%, utilization says that he's on the upswing. Miles Sanders, despite going from 7 to 10 to 18 points on a PPR, utilization says sell now.
Yeah, it's really a case where when Jordan Howard's in the game, he's kind of going to get the rock too. But Sanders, they're just getting him out, and he's running some wheel routes when he gets matched up on a linebacker. And that's
you need a big play. You need a big play from Sanders. But Sanders now is not even in the same mix as your Phillip Lindsays and all those guys. He's been below those guys anyway. He's not even in the same territory right now as Royce Freeman. Really. Royce Freeman's getting more work in the running game, more work in the passing game, more routes, all of those things. Miles Sanders, literally, he's in RB4 territory. Basically, if you put him in your lineup, you are just praying. You're praying that he scores on a big play.
Well, that's going to wrap it up, folks, because my kids need flu shots. So we're honest with you here. There's transparency. Appreciate it. He is Dwain McFarland of EstablishTheRun.com. Follow him at Dwain McFarland. I am at Drake Fantasy on Twitter. You can go over and read my stuff at FightingChanceFantasy.com. And, of course, we got the Facebook group. We got the YouTube. We got everything. We're going to have a cooking show at some point, probably. We're taking over the world here, Dwain and I. And week by week, you'll see bigger things from us. We promise. So thanks, everybody. Take it easy, and good luck in week 7. See you later.